Welcome back, everybody, to Active Self-Protection Extra. Today on John's Briefs, back again with Mark Victor from Attorneys for Freedom. And we are talking about the video that's gotten a lot of play on the big channel of the defensive encounter in Baltimore at the gas station. And Mark said to me earlier when we showed up here, he's like, we could just talk about that one all day. So let's get after it. Today's video is brought to us by Firearms Legal Protection. Firearms Legal Protection is a legal defense program for lawful gun owners with a 24/7 emergency hotline and plans designed specifically for self-defenders. They are offering a discount on their plan to Ask fans, so hit the link in the description for that. Mark, I always appreciate you being on the channel, man.
So this is one of the more fun things I get to do in my day, so it's always a pleasure.
So let's, if you haven't watched the video, we'll put a link in the description to the narrated video. We have an argument that starts in a convenience store. That convenience store argument is because a guy cut in line or something like that. Now our one guy decides he's going to keep that argument going. After they leave, he's going to come over and they yip at each other. He opens his car door and punches him. Then our person in the car pulls off just a little ways and then stops, opens the car door and shoots him twice. And then closes the car door and off they go. That's where it ends. And as far as I know, there's still an active investigation. Even though they had that person's license plate, it's clear on 1080p camera, so I can't imagine they're not going to find him.
To me, of all the videos that you and I together have commented on, this is the toughest one.
It's super gray.
This is a tough one right here. And the reason I think it's tough, and by the way, I think that there was an important fact that maybe in the summary you left out that we should just mention. Well, actually, let's go through the whole thing. So some argument happens inside. Right. We'll assume this is a verbal argument. It looks to me like the other fellow, the guy who got shot, is further away from the car at the beginning. Whatever happened inside is over at this point.
It's far done.
The smart thing to do is everybody go have a nice day.
Right.
That's the smart thing to do. But that's not what happened. The guy who gets shot walks across the gas station area then and opens the car door. I thought your point about, in fact, virtually everything you said in this video, you stole my thunder.
Yes.
You did a great job in this video. I should do on practically every video I've seen. But if you had locked the door, maybe we don't have
this problem.
I don't understand that.
I drive off.
So this guy's opening the door. This is a pretty serious situation, I think, right?
Forceful entry?
Absolutely. This is a very serious situation. And it's important to note that the guy who opens the door, who gets shot, seems to be much bigger than the other fellow inside.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a really important fact to me, because with this kind of a fact, this tells me that the guy who opens the door really could have inflicted serious bodily injury. And so they get into some jaw-jacking thing, and then there's the punch. We don't get to see the punch, right? So I don't know if the punch was in the shoulder, or if the punch was in the face, or what the reaction to that punch was. But there's a punch, and then it seems like that's the end of the incident for the moment.
Where he starts pulling off for a minute.
The guy in the car starts driving off, and then he stops. I want to know why he stopped.
I do too.
And he opened his door. I can imagine now this case going different ways. Because let me tell you, if the reason the guy stopped and opened the door was because what we like to call vengeance or street justice,
right?
You know what? This guy just punched me. I got my firearm. I'll show him. Then he's in the wrong.
Yeah, he's going to prison for a long time.
No question about that. If that's why you stopped your vehicle, because there's no imminency at this point, you can make the second stop here of the second incident is now over. You got punched, shoulder, face, wherever. Now it's over. You're driving away in your car. This guy's picking up his phone. The incident, we'll call number 2, has ended.
Right.
If that's the case, then I think the guy in the car is going to have a very serious problem.
Yeah,
he's going to be charged with an attempted murder, or maybe a murder if this guy dies or something like that, and probably he should be.
Well, and he missed at least one shot, and it hit the car next to him, so then there was a passenger there. We've got, reckless endangerment there, all kinds of charges.
Yeah, that guy, I hope he's got a lot of money for his criminal defense attorney. Now, on the other hand, there might be something else he might have said. Another reason you keep your big mouth shut. Why did you stop the vehicle? Well, maybe what happened here is this guy got punched in the face and decided he wasn't safe to drive. He could have been disoriented. His eyes could have been swelling up. He could have been teared up. He could have been bleeding. I don't know what the situation, but maybe he's not safe to drive. And maybe he was getting out of the vehicle. I could imagine lots of things. Maybe he's going in to clean himself up in the bathroom. Maybe he's going in to call 911 or get the videotape or tell somebody something. I don't know. But a lot of it turns on that point right there. Because if that's what's going on, then the other guy who ultimately gets shot approaches the vehicle.
Right.
And now, as you pointed out in your narration of the vehicle, we got some history with this guy. We know this guy is happy to clearly assault. He's much bigger.
Yep.
This now could be characterized as a very serious aggravated assault, i.e. think serious bodily injury, that could justify the guy in the car with the gun to shoot this fellow. So a lot of it turns on that point. I think that, in fact, maybe all of the case turns on that point.
Yeah, it really does.
What was going on in the head of the guy who stopped? That's the question. Why did you stop your car and open the door after incident number 2 or portion number 2 was ended?
And I think that's a limitation of video because we can never know what's going on in his head.
And it's also a great reason to do what?
Shut up.
Shut up. This is a bad time to be making a statement.
So now, but after that goes down, he shoots a guy a couple times, misses at least one shot, I think 2, and then drives off, doesn't call the police.
Yeah, let me just say, I agree with your observation in the video that if you want to, and this is sort of what Moss was saying in his video, you want to make a good impression on the police officer, get started off on the right foot, you stop down the street, you call 911, you say, hey, I was just attacked by a crazy guy, here's where I am, I'm going to wait, I've got a gun, but I'm going to put it down, make it safe, I'm going to get out of my car and be like this when the police show up with nothing in my hands. That's a good start to the case. You look like a good guy. You look like a bad guy if you take off, but I don't see that as an insurmountable problem, right? As a defense attorney, I might say, look, this guy was just so stunned by what happened, the adrenaline's going, he's just trying to get away from this guy he didn't even think about, or maybe he figured he'd reach a position of safety and then have somebody else call or something like that. I can deal with that. What was very interesting to me about this case is, and you also mentioned this, is I've said on many occasions, being a defense lawyer in Arizona, where you have among the most gun-friendly laws in the nation, and being a criminal defense lawyer in Hawaii, where you have the least gun-friendly laws. And most importantly, Arizona, no duty to retreat.
Correct.
Sometimes referred to as stand your ground. Hawaii, duty to retreat.
Duty to retreat.
I have trouble really figuring out or thinking of a situation that it might come out different. Because if you really think about it, it doesn't come out that different very often. This may be one of those cases, right?
It kind of is because he could just hit the accelerator and go. And so that's a preclusion problem here, right?
It's a really interesting question, right? Because, you know, on one hand, you might say, for example, Arizona. If this case is tried in Arizona, the defense lawyer might say, okay, look, it was stupid for him to stop. Maybe even he wanted to stop to yell at this guy and say, you dirty, rotten, blah, blah, blah. No problem in Arizona.
It's not a problem.
You don't have to retreat.
Right.
It's clearly not the smart thing to do, and wasn't the smart thing. And as you and I have both said ad nauseum, just because you don't have to retreat doesn't mean you shouldn't retreat. It's all.
And the other side of that is just because something stupid doesn't make it criminal.
Right, absolutely. So Hawaii would say you have the additional burden now of, in Hawaii, you're going to get an instruction along the lines of, hey, look, before someone is allowed to use deadly physical force, they must first demonstrate that they were not able to retreat in complete safety.
But what your point earlier, if he said, look, I couldn't, you know, I had just been punched in the face, I was disoriented, I couldn't safely pilot the vehicle, now if I don't have the ability,
I can't retreat in complete safety.
Then I don't have the duty.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, but you know, you might make that argument, right? You might say, okay, well, you couldn't have driven around a little further and retreated a little further. And that argument maybe has a little bit more weight, except for the fact that he opens the door. To me, that opening of the door after, it's one thing if you can't drive, right? Because you've just been punched in the face or something. All right, you stop the car, lock the door, and just cool off for a second, make yourself safe. But to open the door with the gun in your hand at that point, doesn't go so well, I think, for the guy in the car. So at the end of the day, even though I would definitely, I could definitely defend this case, and I would feel like there's a solid defense. And you know, as always, the question: can the state prove, or the government, or the people prove? May very well turn on whether this guy opened his big mouth or not, right? Because what did he say at the scene about why he stopped? But if he didn't say anything, then there's lots of possibilities, especially if he doesn't testify, right? If he doesn't testify, because he didn't say, hey, I just let you know, I'll fully cooperate and I'll testify against this guy or whatever. He didn't say that. So now we might choose to keep him off the stand. And his defense attorney could be up there in front of the jury and say, look, ladies and gentlemen, did the state prove that the reason he stopped was to be an aggressor here? Or could there be 5 other reasons he stopped?
Right.
And because they didn't prove it, like I don't have the burden to prove this.
Nope.
They've got the burden to prove this. And because they didn't prove that the reason he stopped was to aggress, you have to acquit. So it's a really interesting video. And I think people, I'll just make this point too. And I know a lot of we're going to get a lot of I'm going to get a lot of bad comments on this. But that's what makes it fun.
Sure.
I think a lot of gun guys, and I've only been dealing with the gun guys for the last 26 years,
right.
speaking at all the gun shows and this and that, they get a little overly worked up about the importance between the duty to retreat states and the no duty to retreat states, because I really don't think it comes out that differently in many cases.
I agree.
Look, if you could retreat in complete safety, you probably have an imminency problem.
Right. Yep.
If you can retreat in complete safety, then it raises the question in my head, even in an Arizona situation, you probably didn't have an imminent threat. I mean, it's hard to think of a situation where you were dealing with an imminent threat of death or serious physical injury, but you could have retreated in complete safety.
It seems to me that thankfully that in the states that adopted a duty to retreat idea, that they included in there the idea in complete safety.
Complete safety makes it all the difference.
Complete safety.
Complete safety.
Makes a difference.
Not a good chance that you're going to be safe, but complete safety. So when I think about this rule, and of course, you know, because I've been licensed in Arizona much longer than I've been licensed in Hawaii, when I encountered this duty to retreat thing, I thought, oh my God, wow, this is terrible. But then I read the comments to that section and just sort of summarizing them. What they in essence say is, look, we recognize that the duty to retreat thing could be seen as sort of being a coward or goes against the sort of principles of self-defense. We get that. However, the importance of preserving human life to us outweighs. So what we're saying is before you can take a human life, you got to show that you couldn't have just left the scene. You couldn't have followed your advice. What they did is take your advice, which is just advice about if you can retreat, you should. And they made that the law.
Right.
And they added the part about complete safety. So they leave guys like me still with the argument of saying, well, he couldn't retreat in complete safety because this or that, he could have shot the car. Maybe not for this video, but in a different situation, he could have shot the car as I was driving away or chased me down as I was running away or something like that. That lets me argue to the jury, maybe 99% chance he could have been safe, but there's 1% chance I call a guy an expert who says, you know, if he had retreated at that point, there was some reasonable chance that he could have still been attacked, then we don't have the problem.
Then we don't have complete
safety. So it's very
safety.
difficult to see, you know, as a practical matter, I like to have people take a step back and 30,000 foot the whole self-defense thing and say, the question to the jury is really easy. Everything you heard, ladies and gentlemen, every witness statement, all the physical evidence, the video, the this, what we need you guys to tell us is, given everything, did this defendant act reasonably?
Yes.
If the answer is yes, well then he walks. If the answer is no, he walks into the prison.
Right.
That's
Can you prove he acted unreasonably? Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Depending on the state, right? Because if it's an affirmative defense, then you might have the burden to prove you acted reasonably. If it's a state like Arizona where the government has it, then the question is, did they prove beyond a reasonable doubt that my guy was unreasonable?
Right.
But it always turns on reasonable. So when you're thinking about this stuff, don't think about it in terms of, well, does the law technically allow me to do this? Think about it in terms of, am I going to be seen as being reasonable? And when you think reasonable and prudent. Reasonable and prudent I kind of like a little bit better because it puts a better spin on it. It's just what you preach and what I preach here, be prudent, right? Because look, what we really want to do, the reason we do this stuff is because we want reasonable, responsible gun owners. Because it's the idiots who make us look bad. It's the idiots who make don't be a stat for the gun grabber side of the argument, right? When you use a gun in a way you shouldn't, said another way, unreasonably, you become a statistic for the argument on the other side to ban guns or something along those lines.
And you get in an incident like this one that we had, and it's so gray. I'm going to say, as a defender, I don't want to be in that situation where it's so gray, because all I see is the dollar signs piling up at the attorney's desk. And the sleepless nights. And okay, again, of course, I recommend that you have something like firearms legal protection that keeps you safe in those kind of incidents from the financial burden, but you're still going to be up at night. You're still going to be the one who's looking at the jail time. You're still going to be the one who deals with the social aftermath of that. And I just don't think it's worth it.
Always smarter to retreat if you can, detour if you can, use verbal judo, as you say, as you can. Don't get in a situation where you've got to do something with your firearm. You know, I heard, in a different context, I remember I had an airline crash case that I worked on early in my career, and I remember the pilot, the expert pilot, said something along the lines of, you know, expert pilots use their expert judgment to avoid situations where their expert judgment would be needed.
Right.
That's what, same thing we're saying. Be ready, be proficient, know the law, but
and then stay out of those problems.
avoid the situations to display how good you are.
Amen and amen. Guys, again, don't get in these ones. Only get there when you absolutely have to, and use the prudent thing. You know, realize that sometimes if somebody is prudent, you might get called a prude, but you won't get called an inmate.